My name is Alice, and that evening when I stepped into the restaurant, the warm golden light glinting off each crystal wine glass, I knew instantly I wasn't welcome. The rehearsal dinner for my sister-in-law Clarissa's wedding was held at an upscale Italian restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. Everything was perfectly arranged, from the ivory peony bouquets on the tables to the soft piano music in the background. Except for one detail. There was no seat for me. I stood in the middle of the reception hall feeling invisible. A few guests gave me once-overs then looked away, as if I were a server who showed up at the wrong time. I looked around for the name board, nothing. On the long table draped in silk were handwritten name cards, elegant and dripping in favoritism. Mine wasn't one of them. Clarissa stood up from the head of the table, her champagne-colored satin dress hugging her body like it was tailor-made for that smug moment. She held her wine glass and walked toward me, her voice syrupy sweet and sharp as a blade. Alice, oh my gosh, you came? We only reserve seats for the people actually in the ceremony. A few quiet chuckles rose from the group behind her, mostly friends of my husband's family from the finance world, people who preferred investment jargon over eye contact. I turned to look at Ethan, my husband, who was standing by the bar with his parents. He didn't look at me. Not a glance, not a step toward me. He raised his glass to an older man in a pinstripe suit and laughed, as if I wasn't being publicly humiliated. Do you want me to repeat the invitation? Clarissa went on, tilting her head slightly. I'm sure you understand this is a family-only gathering. I felt my spine stiffen, my heart thudded with a cold rhythm. I'd put up with Clarissa for 3 years, the side eyes, the fake compliments laced with hidden insults, but this time she did it in front of both families. And Ethan just stood there, acting like nothing was happening. I smiled, a small smile steady and calm. Of course, maybe I should go freshen up a bit. I turned away, my heels tapping against the marble floor. No one stopped me, no one asked if I needed anything, but inside me something shifted. I didn't leave the party, I just stepped outside, stood on the balcony overlooking New York City glowing beneath the skyline. The night breeze brushed against my cheek, snapping me out of the haze. I opened my clutch, took out my phone and sent a short message. No fluff, no repetition. That message was the ignition switch for everything Clarissa couldn't begin to imagine. 6 days after the rehearsal dinner, I walked into the annual Harper Foundation Gala, an event that gathered nearly all of the East Coast elite. The party was held at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, beneath dazzling crystal chandeliers, with chamber music so perfectly curated it might as well have been synced to the stock portfolios of the guests. Clarissa was one of the co-hosts this year. She wore a deep red gown clinging to her like ambition, with a diamond bracelet big enough to reflect light across the room. Beside her stood her father, Charles Whitaker, chairman of Whitaker Holdings, the 4th largest real estate firm in the country, and the man who always treated me like a tacky accessory his son Ethan had mistakenly brought home. But that night the most important person wasn't Clarissa or Charles, it was Franklin Hawthorne, the gala's main sponsor and the legendary CEO of Hawthorne Group, a venture capital firm managing billions in rotating investments across the U.S. I knew Franklin wasn't there out of goodwill. He was the type who never stepped out of a car without knowing exactly whose hand he'd be shaking at the end of the room. And I also knew Clarissa was gunning for a communications director's seat at Hawthorne's charity foundation, the one she called the last golden ticket to cement her status as a modern woman of the century icon. Around 8:00 p.m. Clarissa took the stage, lifting a glass of champagne. The room fell silent. I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude to Mr. Franklin Hawthorne, she began, her voice sweet like chocolate ganache with a spiky aftertaste. What an honor it is to have you here. The investment eagle, Forbes, once called the eye that never sleeps. A few polite chuckles. Clarissa smiled and then twisted the knife. I used to think that nickname meant you were always alert, but now I'm thinking, maybe you just don't need sleep. With the number of companies Hawthorne Group acquired last year, I doubt you've had time to nap. The temperature in the room visibly dropped. Franklin gave a faint smile, but his eyes didn't. Oh, and of course, Clarissa added, with vision like that, who else could have bought out a whole hospital system and turned it into a chain of luxury wellness spas? No one laughed this time. Just the soft clink of a glass against a plate. I caught Charles Whitaker's eye, His face had gone pale, his fingers gripped his wineglass so tight they turned white. Franklin stood up, he walked away without saying a word. Clarissa probably thought she was dazzling the room with New York Times-worthy wit, but she had just done what even Wall Street veterans feared, publicly mocking Franklin Hawthorne. I felt a chill down my spine, but not from fear. It was the moment I knew the cracks had started. Soon after, I slipped out to the hallway with the only person there who made me feel like myself. Natalie Hawthorne, Franklin's daughter and my best friend since college. Unlike her father, Natalie despised these galas. She was only there out of obligation. "She seriously thinks that scored her points?" Natalie whispered, dry sarcasm in her tone. I stayed silent. "My dad's never going to forget this," she added. "He's been looking for a reason to cut ties with the Whitakers for months. Clarissa just handed him one." I looked at her. "You sure?" Natalie nodded. "He called legal the second he left the room. Trust me, that wedding, no honeymoon. They'll be spending their break plugging stock leaks." I glanced back inside. Clarissa was still smiling, smug like she'd just won a bidding war. She had no idea that toast was the first shot in a war. And this time, I wasn't just the one taking hits. I was ready. I used to think I'd never become the kind of person who plotted revenge. I believed in karma and standing back and letting the world balance itself. But 3 years as a Whitaker daughter-in-law taught me this. The world doesn't balance itself. The best manipulators are the ones who write the rules and break them behind your back. After the gala, while Clarissa basked in press praise, I sat alone in my small office on the 34th floor, the only place in our home untouched by my mother-in-law. On the screen was the financial structure map of Whitaker Holdings, which I had quietly compiled over the past year. Tangled links between subsidiaries, stock-back loans, and risky exclusivity deals. All tied to capital from the Hawthorne Group. Clarissa thought next week's wedding rehearsal was about gowns, scented candles, and cocktail menus. For me, it was about timing. I pulled out my phone, my hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from knowing this call would change everything. "This is Alice Whitaker, Ethan's wife," I said as Franklin Hawthorne's deep voice came through on the other end. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "It's never too late when something interesting's involved, Miss Alice," he replied, clearly surprised. "What can I do for you?" I took a deep breath. "I know you're considering pulling your investment from Whitaker Holdings." Silence. "I'm not calling to stop that," I continued. "I'm calling to ask, if I gave you a compelling reason to accelerate the process, would you be willing to act right before Clarissa's rehearsal dinner?" On the other end, Franklin let out a low, dry laugh, completely devoid of humor. "I always knew you were smarter than you let on, but I didn't expect you to be this strategic." "I don't need recognition," I replied, voice steady. "I need you to act at the right moment." There was a long pause, then he said, "I'll call my legal team. And you should know, if this goes forward, there's no taking it back." "I'm not looking to take it back," I said. I hung up, my hand resting on a folder labeled Whitaker Confidential. Every page was a piece of my life over the past few years. The humiliation, the dismissal, the way I was looked through like a shadow in their family tree. I used to stay silent for Ethan, because I thought he wasn't like them. But the night Clarissa quietly erased my name from the table, and Ethan just stood there, smiling with a martini in his hand, I knew I had been alone for far too long. 2 days later, I met Natalie at a small cafe in Soho. She had traded her blazer for a cream turtleneck and a charcoal scarf, but the sharp glint in her eyes, that same look you'd expect from the daughter of a legendary investor, was still there. "He's already spoken with the board," Natalie said bluntly. "Funds will be pulled at exactly 8:00 p.m. Friday, right when Charles takes the stage." I nodded. That was the night of the rehearsal dinner. Charles would be standing in the center of the ballroom, in front of media, partners, and close family friends, boasting about a strategic alliance between Whitaker and a new investor, something he believed would relaunch his empire after 2 years of bad investments. "He trusts you," Natalie added, her voice low. "And me? I think you're dangerous and brilliant." I didn't smile. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own story. Clarissa had no idea that by choosing to humiliate me, she had created the one enemy she couldn't predict. Quiet, patient, and waiting for the right moment. And that Friday night, beneath glittering lights and the clinking of crystal wine glasses, a brand new chapter would begin, not the storybook bride chapter, but the first act of a crumbling empire. The next morning, the top headlines splashed across every financial outlet read, Whittaker Holdings plummets, Golden Alliance dissolves into thin air. Clarissa and Alexander's wedding, the one that had been hyped across every outlet for weeks, was cancelled by noon. No press release, no apology. Just a short email sent to guests with the subject line, Tomorrow's ceremony will no longer proceed as planned. The Whittaker estate in Long Island, once decked out with a wedding tent, Tiffany chairs and even a special fountain, now looked like an abandoned construction site. The event staff showed up before sunrise to dismantle everything. I stood on the second-floor balcony looking out at the backyard. Clarissa sat motionless on a white plastic chair, still in her silk robe. Her hair was loosely tied, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep and too many tears. But I knew she wasn't crying over love. Clarissa loved power, not the man beside her. And this morning she had lost both. That night Ethan came home still smelling of old wine and confusion. He closed the door gently, saying nothing. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the silence stretching long between us. Eventually he spoke first. I don't get it, what just happened? I looked him straight in the eye. I think you know better than anyone. Your family played with fire for too long. Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair, eyes tired. Clarissa, she's spiraling. She lost her sponsorships, the media pulled coverage, all the fashion brands that sent dresses pulled out. Even the diamond jewelry she flaunted got recalled. Turns out it was bought using company accounts. I said nothing, I just poured more tea into his cup. My dad's being summoned for an internal hearing. Insider trading suspicions. He mortgaged most of his shares just weeks before the collapse. The board has temporarily removed his authority. Ethan spoke like he was narrating a documentary, like it had nothing to do with his own family. I recognized the shock. He hadn't yet realized where he stood in the rubble. Did you know this would happen? He asked slowly. No blame, just a sincere question. I looked down at the teacup in my hands, then answered softly, like a breath. I knew they'd pay a price. How steep that price would be was entirely their choice. A long silence passed. Ethan nodded, eyes still distant. It's strange. You're nothing like anyone else in this family, and maybe that's the only reason I still love you. I looked up. In his eyes was something new. Not fear, not disappointment, respect. For the first time in years within the Whittaker household, I wasn't being judged by where I came from or what school I went to. I was the one who stood up at the right moment and didn't lose her self-worth. In the days that followed, the bad news hit like dominoes. The Manhattan office was seized by the bank for unpaid debts. The penthouse where Clarissa once filmed lifestyle vlogs was repossessed. She wiped her social media clean after her so-called friends unfollowed her, deleted group photos and gave exclusive interviews to tabloids, saying, Clarissa was never truly genuine. Then came a call from Natalie. She invited me to lunch at a small restaurant in Brooklyn. When I arrived, she placed a small navy velvet box on the table. From my father, she said. He said this is a reward for the only person in the Whittaker family who actually understood the market. I opened the box. Inside was a silver fountain pen, the nib etched with intricate patterns. On the inside of the cap a phrase was engraved. Patience is a kind of wisdom. I smiled and tucked the pen into my coat pocket, not because I needed a reward, but because I knew this was the final recognition, and the one that truly mattered. 3 weeks after Whittaker Holdings officially declared bankruptcy, I returned to the Long Island mansion one last time. The house, once filled with fresh flowers, crystal glasses, and cheerful brunches, was now empty, hauntingly still. The artwork had been taken down, the wine cabinet was bare, and the only sound echoing through the halls was the shuffling of movers. Upstairs I found a mahogany box neatly placed in the corner of Clarissa's bedroom. Inside were the jewels she once used to cement her status. Black Tahitian pearl necklaces, an 8-carat emerald ring once featured in Harper's Luxe, and sapphire earrings that had caused a stir at the Hamptons Gala. I lifted each one, feeling the weight not of the precious metals but of what they once symbolized, a world built on arrogance, deceit, and cold ambition. I didn't keep them. I brought everything to the headquarters of HopeWorks Foundation, a scholarship fund for underprivileged children. When I handed the box to the CEO, she looked at me in disbelief. Are you sure? Each piece could go for 6 figures at auction. I nodded. Use them to create something that actually matters. A week later, I received a thank you letter. The pieces would be featured in the spring charity auction. For the first time, they wouldn't be worn behind closed doors. They'd be in the spotlight, no longer symbols of status but of opportunity. Ethan and I moved out of our luxury Manhattan apartment and into a 2-story red crumb home in Brooklyn. No concierge, no brass elevator, just a small yard, a few potted plants, and the sound of kids biking down the street. And yet, I felt more at peace than ever. Ethan resigned from Whitaker shortly after the company was officially dissolved. He was offered a teaching position at a private business school in Brooklyn. Not glamorous, but enough to make him smile each morning as he walked out the door. As for me, I began rebuilding my career. Not in anyone else's shadow, but from the ground up. For the first time, truly. I called Natalie. I'm thinking of starting an independent financial consulting firm, I said as we sat at the cafe on the corner, focusing on transparency, ethics, and supporting small businesses. Natalie tilted her head, her eyes lighting up. The next day, I received an email from Lambert Enterprises. Sender, man. I believe in intentional beginnings. My door is always open to those who choose a different path. Horizon Strategies was born that February, a name Ethan came up with, meaning always looking forward. Our first office had just 4 people, 2 recycled wood desks and a noisy coffee machine, but I had never seen a space more full of hope. Natalie, now officially the CEO of Lambert Enterprises after Damon stepped into the chairman role, was the first to sign a strategic partnership with us. Lambert didn't need new partners, but they chose us for one reason. They believed in work rooted in real values, not manipulation. Under Natalie's leadership, Lambert entered a new era, quieter, deeper, more human. Meanwhile, Horizon began earning trust from family businesses, tech startups, and nonprofit organizations, those long ignored by the financial world dominated by names like Whitaker. One day, I asked Natalie, "Do you think we're doing the right thing, not playing the games the old world thrives on?" She just smiled. "Alice, sometimes changing the world starts with refusing to follow it." That night, I sat on our tiny second-floor balcony, watching the streetlights flicker below, a cup of tea in hand. Ethan came up behind me and draped a thick knit cardigan over my shoulders. "You've got that meeting with the micro-investment group tomorrow, right?" I nodded. "They manufacture toys for kids on the autism spectrum. No one will lend to them, but I think they deserve a shot." Ethan smiled. "If anyone understands how to give people a chance at the right moment, it's you." A breeze rustled through the trees. I looked up at the dark sky. No stars, but completely peaceful. 3 months after Horizon Strategies officially launched, I received an unexpected call from an international number. When I picked up, I heard Charles Whitaker's voice. Lower, raspier, and surprisingly stripped of arrogance. "Alice, thank you for picking up. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted to say, I was wrong." I said nothing, not out of anger, but surprise. This was the man who once looked at me like I was the only stain on his family's perfect portrait. "I'm living with my brother in Vermont," he continued, "doing freelance consulting, writing strategic reports for a few startups. They don't know I once ran a billion-dollar company. They just see an old man who listens." His voice hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I thought I taught Clarissa everything she needed, but I never taught her how to lose. And then she lost. The hard way. Now, she's starting over." I had heard about Clarissa. After being cut off by her friends and abandoning her social media, she was sent to a finishing school in Lausanne, Switzerland, a place that trained heiresses in poise and silence. Not everyone would understand, but I did. For Clarissa, it was a psychological sentence. Charles sighed. "I don't expect forgiveness. But if someday you think I'm worth it, let me know." The call ended in silence, but for me it was a quiet closure. No resentment, no debts to settle. Just a man learning how to step down from his throne on his own feet. That spring, Zoe sent a wedding invitation to Ethan and me. The ceremony took place in a small garden at the Museum of Modern Art, the place where they first met during a charity fundraiser. No ball gown, no drone cameras, just an intimate gathering of close friends under blooming cherry blossoms. Zoe wore a simple white silk dress, holding hands with James, a literature professor at NYU she had once sat next to at a cultural symposium. No prenups, no investors in sight. Just honest, gentle glances between two people who never expected to find each other in a city this loud. Ethan and I sat in the second row next to Deman, now retired from the spotlight but still sharp-eyed as ever. As Zoe reached the end of the aisle, I heard him whisper, "For the first time in my life, I'm investing in something that doesn't need a return." Ethan held my hand under the table. Without saying a word, I knew exactly what he was thinking. We had weathered the storm. Not to return to what was, but to discover a version of us that was new. One with no shadow of Clarissa, no pressure from the Whitaker name, just us. When the party ended, Zoe pulled me aside into a corner of the garden. "I still have the letter you sent last year. The one where you said you wanted to change how the world treats those seen as not good enough. You did it, Alice." I chuckled softly. "Not quite, but I've learned I no longer need anyone else to define me." Zoe handed me a small box. Inside was a delicate necklace with a compass pendant. "To remind you, the right direction isn't always marked on someone else's map." That night, as Ethan and I returned to Brooklyn, light rain had just fallen. We stood by the window watching droplets collect on the glass. Everything felt still, peaceful. Ethan placed a hand on my back. "You know something? I never thought I'd be happy walking away from the old world, but because of you, I've learned how to begin a new chapter." I smiled and rested my head on his shoulder. "I don't need fame, I don't need applause. What I have and choose to hold on to is a life that's real. A life where I don't have to ask anyone's permission to exist, where I can build good things in my own way. And if someone asks what I did to change everything, I'll say this: I simply waited for the right moment and didn't miss it. My story didn't begin with power or status. It began with silent years of being overlooked, but in that silence I learned to observe, to wait, and to reclaim my worth with clarity and resolve. Today I live a life not defined by the name on a gate, but by the values I create each day. Justice was served, not with noise, but with the quiet strength of someone who knows she no longer has anything to prove. What do you think of Alice's choices and the transformation of those who once looked down on her? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional, unexpected, and inspiring family stories.